Charlie is still only 17, and nobody should be talking about PGA Tour cards or major championships yet. But for the first time, the results are beginning to make the conversation about more than just his last name, and one afternoon in Florida showed just how close he's getting. Back in April, Charlie entered U.S. Open local qualifying at Wellington National Golf Club with something very different on the line. This wasn't a junior event built around players his own age. This was the beginning of the road toward one of the biggest championships in golf, with amateurs and professionals all fighting for the same limited qualifying spots. Charlie opened with 2 early bogeys, the kind of start that can end a qualifying round before it really begins. But instead of disappearing down the leaderboard, he steadied himself. He made 3 birdies, fought his way back, and signed for an even par 72. Then, he looked at the scoreboard and realized how painfully close he had come. Charlie finished just 1 shot, short of getting into a playoff for the final advancement spots. 1 shot. Reuters described it as his best U.S. Open qualifying attempt yet, and that detail matters because this wasn't another story about Charlie dominating a junior field. He hadn't qualified. There was no trophy and no dramatic celebration waiting at the end. What he had done was prove that against a much deeper field, under real pressure, he could put himself within a single shot of moving on. For Charlie, the result was disappointing, but the message behind it was much bigger. That is what makes his 2026 season interesting. The improvement is becoming measurable. He's putting himself in positions he simply wasn't reaching a few years ago. But there's also a danger in getting carried away. Close isn't the same as through. A strong qualifying attempt doesn't suddenly make Charlie an elite amateur, and being Tiger Woods' son doesn't give him a shortcut through the hardest stages of competitive golf. At some point, he would have to stop being the player who nearly made it and become the player who finished the job. He wouldn't have to wait very long for that opportunity. Just a few weeks later, Charlie got another chance. This time, there would be no comfortable margin, no easy way through, and nowhere to hide when everything came down to a playoff. And this time, Charlie Woods didn't let it slip away. That opportunity came a little later in 2026 at Heathrow Country Club in Florida. Charlie was trying to qualify for the U.S. Junior Amateur, one of the biggest events in junior golf, and a tournament with a history that means more to the Woods family than most. But qualifying was anything but straightforward. By the end of the round, Charlie still hadn't secured his place. Instead, everything came down to a 3-man playoff for one remaining spot. For once, being close was no longer going to be enough. This was exactly the kind of situation that had followed Charlie throughout 2026. Earlier in the season, he had missed a U.S. Open qualifying playoff by a single shot. Now, only a short time later, he was standing in another pressure situation with his season hanging on just a handful of swings. There was no comfortable margin and no guarantee somebody else would make the mistake for him. Charlie had to take the spot himself, and this time, when the opportunity appeared, he finished the job. Charlie won the playoff and officially booked his place in the U.S. Junior Amateur. On paper, it was simply qualification for another tournament. But for Charlie, the significance went much deeper. His father had won the U.S. Junior Amateur 3 consecutive times, becoming the first player ever to accomplish that feat. Those victories were among the earliest signs that Tiger Woods was developing into something extraordinary. Charlie was now heading back to that same championship carrying a very different story. The comparison was impossible to avoid, but copying Tiger was never the point. Charlie had already played the U.S. Junior Amateur twice before and failed to advance out of stroke play on both occasions. Those results showed just how difficult elite junior golf really is. A famous surname doesn't earn you a place in match play, and expectations don't lower the scores on the leaderboard. But in 2026, something was becoming measurable. First came his strongest U.S. Open qualifying attempt. Then came a playoff victory with advancement directly on the line. Little by little, Charlie was starting to turn near misses into actual results. Still, qualification wasn't the breakthrough everyone was waiting for. The real test would come once Charlie arrived at the championship and faced the strongest junior players in the country. He had been there before. He had fallen short before. And if 2026 really was different, this was where he would have to show it. Getting into the championship was one thing. What Charlie did once he got there showed just how much had changed. When Charlie finally arrived at the U.S. Junior Amateur in 2026, this was supposed to be the moment where all that progress started to show. Instead, almost immediately, everything began falling apart. He opened with a bogey, followed it with a triple bogey, and after after only 5 holes, Charlie was already 6 over par. At a championship where only the best players would survive stroke play, that kind of start can effectively end your week before it has even begun. But Charlie was about to show something that hadn't always been part of his game. Instead of chasing impossible shots or allowing one bad stretch to become an even bigger disaster, Charlie settled down. Over his final 13 holes, he actually played 1 under par, dragging himself back to a round of 76. It still wasn't the score he wanted, but there was something important hidden inside it. In his first appearance at this championship, Charlie had opened with an 82. The next time, he improved slightly to 81. Now, in his third attempt, that opening score had dropped all the way to 76. The number was getting smaller, but the pressure was about to get much bigger. Charlie entered the second round knowing there was almost no room left for another mistake. He needed something special just to keep his championship alive. And this time, he delivered. Charlie shot an even par 70, his strongest round yet at the U.S. Junior Amateur. The highlight came at the 332-yard par 4 13th, where he drove the green and converted the opportunity for eagle. One swing had suddenly changed the entire feeling around his round, but the eagle wasn't actually the most impressive part of what Charlie had done. Think about where he had been only a short time earlier, 6 over through 5 holes, staring at what looked like another early exit. From that point forward, Charlie played his next 31 holes in 1 under par. That wasn't one lucky birdie or one spectacular drive. It was nearly 2 full rounds of controlled golf after his tournament had started in the worst possible way. And when the final scores were counted, that fight had given him one more chance. Charlie had climbed all the way back into a 14-player playoff for only 2 remaining places in match play. 2 spots, 14 players, and for the first time in 3 appearances, Charlie Woods was standing right on the edge of advancing to the next stage of the U.S. Junior Amateur. But after everything he had done to get there, his entire championship was now going to come down to one brutal playoff moment. 14 players. 2 places. After everything Charlie had done to fight his way back into the championship, the margin for error had disappeared completely. Players ahead of him were already making birdies, which meant Charlie knew exactly what was required. Playing safe probably wasn't going to be enough. He needed to attack. And on the playoff hole, with his U.S. Junior Amateur run hanging in the balance, Charlie decided to do exactly that. But one unexpected distraction was about to make an already difficult situation even harder. Around Charlie's swing, the sound of a camera or phone suddenly broke through the tension. He was visibly frustrated, but there was no opportunity to reset the entire moment. Charlie still had to play the shot in front of him. Knowing birdie was essentially required, he went aggressively after the par 5 and tried to reach the green in 2. The ball instead found thick rough, leaving him with an extremely difficult recovery. After battling back for nearly 2 full rounds, one playoff hole was beginning to undo everything. Charlie eventually made bogey, and just like that, his run was over. On paper, the result looked painfully familiar. Another U.S. Junior Amateur appearance without reaching match play. But that doesn't tell the full story. In his first appearance, Charlie had opened with an 82. The next time, his scores improved to 80 and 74. This time, he produced rounds of 76 and 70 and came within a playoff of advancing. The ending hurt, but the gap between Charlie and the next level was clearly shrinking, and there wasn't much time to think about it. Charlie soon moved on to the Junior PGA Championship, where another difficult opening round put him under pressure again. He started with a 75, then responded with a 2 under 70 to climb back up the leaderboard and survive the 36-hole cut. Once again, the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. When Charlie got himself into trouble, he was increasingly finding ways to respond. The problem was that maintaining that level for an entire championship remained another challenge altogether. In the third round, Charlie shot 77 and missed the 54-hole cut at 6 over par. It was another setback, but it also revealed exactly where his game stands right now. The breakthrough is real, the recovery under pressure is improving, the scores are moving in the right direction, but the consistency still isn't there yet. And that may actually be the most important part of Charlie Woods' story, because the next stage of his career is already waiting. That next stage is already starting to take shape. Charlie has committed to Florida State, where he is expected to be